Well, Colleen, indeed that is true. The airport's open today, but the police were closely watching. One of those people arrested was at Kennedy Airport.
And just about 16 minutes later, after Dan Rather's report about the subsequent closures with the arrests at JFK and LaGuardia airports, in a compelling twist, he and Anthony Mason first report the 9/11 incident with United Airlines Flight 23 at JFK Airport.
About events surrounding Tuesday. And Anthony Mason, you have a very good example of this in a story that came to light today.
Yeah, the Associated Press, Dan, is reporting, citing a law enforcement source, that the FBI is investigating whether an altercation which occurred at Kennedy Airport on Tuesday may in fact have been another aborted hijacking attempt. Now, this Tuesday incident occurred about 9 a.m., which was the same time, of course, the two planes slammed into the World Trade Center towers. Apparently, a United Airlines plane, Flight 23, bound for Los Angeles, was boarded. Passengers on board were told they were not going to take off. And three males traveling on this plane refused to disembark. The Associated Press says the argument with a member of the flight crew became so heated, the crew member called airport security. But by the time security got there, the three men had vanished. As I say, the FBI is reportedly now investigating this whole incident, which occurred at Kennedy Airport roughly at the same time as the other two attacks, and whether this, in fact, may have been a hijacking as well.
I thought it was especially interesting, Anthony, that the Attorney General, he wouldn't give a number of the people who might still be at large, that is, people who didn't get aboard the hijacked planes, but in some ways were part of the conspiracy. And it's a hunch, and you say, well, don't report your hunches, but when security got heightened around the White House today and when some airports were shut back down, you had to think that part of that was because they were still hoping to catch some of those people still at large. Now, a source quoted by the Associated Press as being, quote, knowledgeable of the workings of the airline industry, said the man was arrested at Kennedy Airport. That man was checked in sometime between noon and 4 p.m. today. The man was trying to board American Airlines Flight 299 bound for San Jose, California. The man had been scheduled for an earlier flight on Tuesday bound for Los Angeles. Now, we reported this incident before this evening. But that flight, the one on Tuesday, which was due to take off around 9 o'clock in the morning, New York time, the flight was canceled after the terrorist attack began on the World Trade Center.
The police commissioner of New York was quoted this evening as saying he has no idea whether the man arrested or those detained were connected to the terrorist attacks on Tuesday.
But certainly one could understand why the FBI is very interested in a man who has an altercation on the plane, if the reports are correct, an alleged altercation on the plane.
That's a separate incident we're talking about, Dan, that occurred on Tuesday on a flight that was scheduled to go to Los Angeles, but was canceled because of the attacks on the World Trade Center. It was roughly the same time, 9 a.m. Three males on that flight, United Airlines Flight 23 bound for Los Angeles, refused to get off the plane. The FBI, according to the Associated Press, is now investigating this incident to see whether it may have been an aborted hijacking.
Well, one can see why the FBI and other law enforcement agencies they'll be busy for a long while trying to sort out all of these things.
As you can tell between Dan Rather and Anthony Mason's precautionary reporting, they seem to think that the suspects arrested at JFK Airport were likely the ones attempting to hijack Flight 23 on 9/11. However, as we continue with follow-up reporting, some of those upcoming details will answer that question.
For whatever reason, the two groups detained, we have heard nothing on their whereabouts or disposition. And earlier this evening, we spoke with a passenger who was on an American Airlines flight. Wow. Now, you're sitting there with a, partial plane load, full plane load worth of passengers waiting to go to Los Angeles. And given the climate right now, actually, you're on the ground in a city where the World Trade Center is gone. That must have scared the hell out of everybody.
It was surreal. I mean, it really brought terrorism within arm's reach. I mean, you see these scenes on TV, but it's a whole different experience when it's only a heartbeat away. And everyone was very calm before it happened. Everyone was actually looking forward to getting home, and it really changed the whole equilibrium of the plane once this all happened.
Had you seen any words exchanged prior to this with those passengers and members of the flight crew?
Not at all. I was actually sitting in the back of the plane, about 3 rows from the very back. And it was just, we don't even really know exactly which seats those passengers were in. They were in the front end of the coach section of the plane.
Because we have learned since that a total of 8 people were either arrested or detained. All of them seem to have a common thread: impersonating airline employees, telling one story only for officials to learn that the truth was something else. And the wildest theory of the afternoon was that perhaps another set of potential hijackers was going to try the same thing with a commercial airline.
It all began at this United Airlines terminal, Port Authority sources tell News Channel 4, just after 5:30 this evening. Here's what we know so far. While already on board and awaiting unloading by other passengers, 3 of the suspects are confronted by the crew. And it's not clear why the crew became suspicious. But when escorted off the plane, one claimed to be a pilot and displayed a pilot's license. Sources confirm that that license was, quote, bogus.
Well, 4 men detained at Kennedy Airport were picked up after they boarded a United Airlines jet bound for Los Angeles. And Peter Black was a passenger on the plane at the time. He talked later with ABC's Peter Jennings.
We got on the plane late. We sat on the plane. We were forced to wait for a while. They didn't tell us anything. They told us there were government regulations keeping us there. Finally, after about 2.5 hours, they told us we were finally okay. And then about 15 minutes after that, the back door of the plane opened, and about, it's hard to say, 15 to 20 fully armed SWAT team members filed in. They told us all to put our heads down, and they ran through the plane, grabbed a passenger, handcuffed him, and carried him out.
And how many passengers did they take off in that condition?
From the main cabin, I only saw them take out 1. Afterwards, we heard they took 2 out from business class as well.
Okay, I believe, in fact, in the final analysis, there were 4 men who were taken off 133, which was scheduled for Los Angeles. What was it like trying to get into the airport and onto the airplane before you were put in that position?
It was a lot of lines and queues and waiting, and not a lot of very evident security.
Beg your pardon, did you say not a lot of very evident security?
Not a lot. There was a lot of, looked like, tired people working at the counters. There were a lot of people who were fatigued and very, very cooperative. We went through metal detectors easily. You know, I showed them my driver's license. They gave me my ticket. I went upstairs, waited for the plane, boarded the plane.
How did you get your ticket?
It was an e-ticket. I handed them my driver's license. They handed me my ticket, and I went upstairs. They asked me the question, you know, did you pack your bag?
They asked you the usual questions about security. So you were able to take hand baggage on the airport, onto the airplane with you?
Yes, correct.
Okay, there has in fact been no restriction from the government on that basis today. And I assume that you and your fellow passengers were pretty shaken up.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah. More than that, I think.
Where are you this evening?
I'm at home, thank you.
In New York City?
In Brooklyn, yeah.
In Brooklyn, but you were trying to go to Los Angeles?
Yes, a mistake.
A security crackdown at 2 of New York City's major airports has resulted in at least 8 arrests. Law enforcement sources tell CNN the group includes at least 4 people who were seen at one of the airports on the day of the attacks.
Security at JFK is very tight. Tensions here are very, very high. All over JFK, we see police with shotguns. Some of those police officers posted on top of airport headquarters of police. And they've moved in heavy construction equipment to block entrances to that building. Inside that building, police are questioning several people they took into custody, some believed to be Saudi nationals. Police have arrested one man who posed as a Delta pilot and carried a fake ID badge. He was trying to get on a flight, and sources say he had a ticket dated Tuesday. And also, we're told that some of the men were carrying knives. And at LaGuardia Airport, 3 men were taken into custody after agents say they tried to pose as crew members. And across the river at Newark International Airport in New Jersey, several men were taken off a Saudi plane after being identified on a INS watch list. One last thing tonight. Police are investigating an altercation at JFK here on Tuesday. There was a 9 a.m. flight to Los Angeles. 3 men became angry when the flight was canceled. Security had to be called. And by the time security got here, those 3 men had disappeared.
New York's 3 major airports are closed this morning after 10 men were detained on Thursday. One of them tried to get on a flight to San Jose, California after showing a pilot ID.
Authorities in New York City shut down all 3 airports again last night after as many as 10 people were detained in connection with Tuesday's attacks. Police at Kennedy Airport arrested a man trying to get past security with a fake pilot's ID. As many as 9 others were detained at Kennedy and at New York's LaGuardia Airport. Officials say 2 groups tried to board 2 separate flights. There are reports that some of them were carrying knives and false identification. Shocked passengers at LaGuardia watched as police boarded their plane.
A whole slew of about 20 policemen came on. You know, several in SWAT gear, others that were just, you know, Port Authority police with pistols, all guns out and blaring, but not. And we all were told to put our heads down. And they, meanwhile, were wrestling this guy in the back, and they dragged him off. And there were a couple people sitting right in front of me. They also asked them to come off. They handcuffed them and took them with them.
Greg, here at JFK Airport, instead of getting ready to resume flights in and out of here, we are shut down, have been shut down since late yesterday afternoon. Several security incidents here, also at LaGuardia. Let me tell you what happened. There was an incident on an American Airlines flight yesterday. It was headed to Los Angeles. 3 people were taken off at gunpoint by police who secretly boarded using a catering cart. They were taken off the flight. And there were also other incidents here. Meanwhile, yesterday afternoon also, apparently the FBI was investigating an altercation on a United flight also bound for Los Angeles. And when asked to leave the plane, the FBI boarded and asked everyone to leave the plane. A couple of people refused, 2 to 3 people. Actually, when security asked people to board, police were called, and by the time they arrived, those people had vanished.
Aside for the additional details added by Virginia Shaw, how the police secretly boarded using a catering cart, aside for her fumblings, what she seems to confirm here is that the FBI were already at JFK Airport still carrying out an investigation on the incident for United Airlines Flight 23, right while these reported attempts to reactivate hijacking missions occurred.